Do
you
like our Christmas tree?
Wait, can you even see it?
Right here. Oh, you can only see it if you're on Facebook or AJ's. And there's
How do I?
Look at all these people.
Yeah, there's just so many humans I don't know that we actually even...
Our world is so crazy.
The world is crazy.
It's crazy. I remember, like, when did social media become a thing?
Like last week.
No.
No,
just
I
started
remember
to-
it because the first year I went traveling, we didn't have Instagram. We didn't even really have Wi-Fi. We would go to McDonald's.
Oh, yeah.
Wi-Fi, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember it was like when I was living in Australia, that's when Instagram started to become big.
What year was that?
2012?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Because that was like
When was
junior
Facebook,
year of
though?
college.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I was like late coming into it, but I feel like that's when it started to get.
I feel like Facebook, like, I think I saw something.
Facebook's been around forever.
It said you joined in 2006,
Yeah.
which I was 17 years old and still in high school.
Yeah.
And now I'm 30.
Oh, for Facebook?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had to have our college email address to get Facebook, or I did at least.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Mine's like my old like hey it's McKay at
You
AIM.com.
had to have like a college email address to
Wow.
get
What?
it. Yeah.
Oh, I
That's
don't remember
crazy.
that.
And I remember there was no news feed type of thing.
Oh my
You were
god,
just,
no.
like, friends
You
with
couldn't like
people.
share stuff. You couldn't even like stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think there's gonna... That makes me just wonder, like, what else is there gonna be?
What
in
is
20
coming
Yeah, like, what's
next?
coming next? That's
Oh.
so nuts. I just
Well,
remember
What's
when...
that show on Netflix that's like very Black Mirror?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my god, I
Oh, tell the people about Black Mirror.
I
What's
haven't
Black-
watched it in a while, but it's just like it's nuts because I feel like you can kind of understand like there's some parts to it that feel like really real. I don't even really know how to explain
Okay.
it. Just watch it. It's creepy. I like
Black
can't watch it
Mirror.
alone. I can't sleep alone.
I mean, that's personally how I feel about the Matrix.
Yeah.
I feel like we live in the Matrix. Just throwing it
Yeah.
out there a little bit.
Sometimes I just wake up and I'm like, how did I get here?
That's interesting.
We go down there.
We could go
The
real
dark
far.
hole.
We
Yeah,
could
oh,
go
yeah,
like,
yeah,
what?
it's like, yeah.
What?
It gets a
What
little
am I
freaky.
touching? Are you?
I am real, yes.
Are you real?
I promise.
Well, we're real and we're here.
Okay.
It's Monday again.
I think we got mad peeps.
Hi,
Did
everyone.
you guys miss us?
It's been
been
two
too
weeks.
long.
how to do a live, so I'm just like
That's alright.
so.
This is AJ's first live experience.
We just
Yeah.
we just pretend we know what we're
Some
doing.
people don't even know who AJ is yet. Let's get this ball rolling.
Alright, do you want to tell the people who you are?
Ooh, okay. So, people, I'm Michaela. Michaela June Photography is my business. And I guess I'll just introduce myself for people who are watching from AJ's who may not know who I am.
Sure.
What? So I'm a couples and wedding photographer, as well as the other side of my business is kind of women's empowerment. I do women's empowerment photography as well as lead vulnerability workshops in the area. That's a little bit about me.
Hi, my name is Sean Adam. I'm with Up and Adam Inspirational Speaking and Life Coaching. I kind of got into that world based on my own personal experiences with just mental health and having to persevere through that, and really understanding that we're all human, we all have challenges, and those don't have to define you.
You're so much better at introducing yourself.
Am I?
Yeah,
Good at that.
I gotta work on that.
I just talk a lot, so I'm good at talking, I think.
True.
I think
That's
all I
why.
have. Just
That's
talk.
why we came together and created Wild Hearts
Yeah.
podcast.
And then we got this amazing lady
Yeah.
who
Who's AJ?
I personally have been blessed to be friends with for now 7 or 8 years, something like that.
Yeah.
I think the first time, actually, this is really
Never
fun.
Never met this girl.
There was wow.
Dibble dabble.
Deliberation? That's the one I wanted. I wanted to say debilitation. No, that's not right. Deliberation on this, the first time we met, and I'm going to go with TRX in the park, 95 degrees, summer day.
I thought it would be yoga. Or nice.
Okay.
Either way, I'm
Hence the deliberation. I'm going with TRX because that was, I remember it was 95 degrees. AJ gave us 2 30-second breaks in an hour.
She's brutal.
And I
That
was
was a fun group. You had a
drenched. Yeah, that was fun. I was actually right next to Sarah Blanchett.
Oh yeah. And Dave was in that class.
Oh yeah, Dave, yep. Dave actually lived below me for a while over on Badger Island. I was like, yo, Dave, what's up, man? Yeah. Okay, so that's my part. When did you meet AJ?
AJ. No, I met AJ when I was working at Profile Coffee Shop for a couple months, and he came in with like Carly
Yeah.
and I don't remember who else. Maybe Shelly. I don't remember who else you were with. Just you and Carly, maybe?
Carly. I remember her talking about you and saying like we would get along really well.
Yeah. Oh, same.
Yeah.
Well, and I had just met Carly like not that long ago, like before that.
Yeah, and I feel like Carly and I were pretty like recent friends, probably within the last like year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's so interesting because so I was working at Profile and you guys came in and ordered coffee, and I remember the Wild Vibes like poster being hung up in Profile, and I remember looking at it, I was like, this looks so cool. Like this looks like something that, and I've never like gone to like festivals or anything. I was like, I feel like I would like that. And then you walked in that same day with Carly, and Carly introduced you, and then somehow Wild Vibes came up, and I was like, oh my god, like, I was just looking at that poster, and then you're like,
can you be a photographer for me?
yeah, and then I was like, heck yes, and my life has been changed ever since.
Well, I think what's funny about you is like, and now that I'm hearing what I met AJ, I feel like you just like meet people and you're like, hi, we're gonna like be
Hi,
friends.
wanna be friends?
Yeah, and
You're
like,
a good connector.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
both of you guys are.
Yeah.
So AJ, now people want to know, who are you?
Me.
Yeah, do the one like if you can remember it, the like, I don't know, how do you say it in the email, like the cool bio, or the more professional
Cool bio?
Yeah.
Can we get part 1 through 7?
Yeah, whatever. I mean, just tell them. Yeah,
Part
whatever.
1
Tell
through 7.
them who you are.
Part
AJ. So I work as a holistic fitness trainer and a yoga teacher. I'm one of the co-founders and co-creators of Wild Vibes Festival and International Retreats. And I lead different wellness and community-based programs, events, and experiences really especially on the Seacoast area, but now around the world too. And I partner with different businesses and creatives and brands and like co-create a really cool, uplifting experience for people. And that's kind of my jam.
Absolutely.
That's your jam.
She's really fucking good at it.
It's really awesome.
I put the emphasis there. So you just want to dive in? Do you just want to dive in? Or...
Yeah, let's get this
all right.
rolling.
So yeah, let's start with your story. Do you want to start with part 1? AJ gave us her story in parts, which is actually like very helpful.
Story.
No, I love it. I mean, well, because like you said, like your life, the way you described, is like a lot of random experiences, but it's not everyone's.
Yeah, that's true.
So I appreciate the fact that you like put it in parts.
Well, I think so. This past year, almost a year ago now, I turned 30, which I feel like was.
Yeah, I just turned 30. Yeah.
I feel like
great.
Well, I've never like been one to kind of like define my life based off of age or like speed things up, slow things down, whatever based off age. But I feel like 30 was a cool milestone just because I was able to recognize like how I exited my 20s and kind of like who I was or my perception of self and life just felt so different than who I was entering into my 20s. And I really feel like so much has happened for me in this last decade that it's kind of hard. It's not like necessarily one moment in time where I can say that this is like where the story begins. It's more so been a series of experiences that I really kind of allowed myself to have, and some are definitely very like chosen and welcome, and others I probably wouldn't necessarily have like picked out for myself, but they are what have really kind of shaped my relationship to my life, and also the approach that I have when it comes time to the work and the things that I'm a part of. But originally, how it kind of all got started, I guess, felt super random and also like so outside of myself or who I thought I was at the time. I would say it kind of began in college. I was definitely like a nightmare of a person when it came time to dealing with the college application process. I didn't look at a single school. I think I like waited last minute to apply. I don't know. I don't think I was as excited about it. It didn't really feel like that was my thing to do, but I was never exposed to another way. And not that wasn't like instilled upon me. You know, my parents were so supportive of everything, but I never saw like what the other options were, like what anyone else. No one else was not going to college, and in fact, like if you weren't, it was kind of actually looked down upon. You know.
Yep.
So I was somewhat good at writing in school. I also loved the movie Almost Famous, and I was like, would it be cool to jump on a tour bus one day and write for Rolling Stones magazine? And that's like literally how I chose my college major. So I ended up at Arizona State studying journalism, and about year 2, I developed pretty debilitating anxiety, like so much so that I was flying back and forth across the country several times, and it just kind of felt like the entire world knew how to operate, like I didn't. And I think looking back on that, I can see that that college experience was probably a time where I was doing something that I didn't necessarily want to do. like kind of going against
Against,
your own intuition, even though that was so covered up by like so many other things. Like I didn't even know what that was. At the time, just like completely disconnected from that.
Yeah.
But I really feel like that's how that anxiety manifested in itself. And kind of long story short, I ended up transferring school back to UNH, and my mom, who was becoming the club director of a women's wellness center, had made what I thought was like a pretty random suggestion that she felt I would be pretty good at doing something in the fitness and the wellness industry. And with going through anxiety and stuff, I was like, what do I have to lose? And I went through the certification process, and I ended up working with this women's wellness center and working out with the trainer twice a week in a small group setting. And I remember it was like women that were a bit older than I, they had kids, we all had different things going on in our lives, but we would come together, and it was like very empowering, like very moving. We would do TRX and kettlebells and boxing and just this like really cool style of training. And yeah, just something about that I like loved and I felt really connected to, and I became very passionate about all this stuff and just like researched everything I could. I was just educating myself on like everything really to do with like health and wellness and the fitness industry. And but I still didn't necessarily have the confidence to go, even though I went through like the certification and I was starting to love this. I didn't necessarily have the confidence to go like be a trainer or even lead group classes. I actually made my older sister teach classes with me. It was hilarious. Like she would be on the mic and I would be the one like showing like the advanced like movements of the exercise.
That's so funny.
But it kind of changed for me when the gym asked if I would create my own format of a class. And I loved putting together things like that. And I remember this class was just at like capacity, women of all shapes and sizes, different ages. Everyone had different things going on in their lives. And I must have entered some sort of like flow state or something because I don't really remember it, but it was like nonstop movement. And I just remember after the class ended, there was this like roar of applause and laughter and high-fiving and hugs and like everyone just like so excited for it to come again next week. And then things just kind of took off from there, and naturally just started to get clients and became like very invested in my clients. I'd go into their homes, and I'd recognize from a pretty young age just how like interconnected everything was, but it took a while to like apply that to myself.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So about a year of doing that full time, and I like went all in with that. I was like, I want to do this. Didn't really like think about anything else. I think I was waitressing for a little while on the side, but I was just teaching as much as I could. I was pretty maxed out with clients and establishing like a pretty good business for myself at a young age. And
So you were your early 20s, right?
yeah, I was like straight out of
21,
college.
right?
Yeah, 21, 22. Really, yeah, I loved it. And then I did something that I think probably seemed like maybe the least like logical thing to do, probably a little like unrealistic and unreasonable. But I also felt like that was something I needed to go follow and explore and left the country.
Yeah. Where'd you go first? What was the first like?
My first trip was, on that experience was to New Zealand with my sister. And we originally had a 6-week trip planned and round trip tickets and everything. It was just going to be like a little short adventure. Neither one of us had never done something like that before, and I don't think we like actually thought we were capable of doing it. I remember when we actually booked the tickets, we like spent, you have that like 24-hour window where you can cancel it and get like your money back. I remember we were like, you cancel it. We'd like run back and forth on the road. And we finally just did it. And it probably took maybe like a week or two until we got into the groove of it. And then you're just surrounded by people that are like doing this as their lifestyle. And man, I could talk forever on like what those experiences have given to me. But yeah, probably within like 2 weeks, we decided to cancel our return ticket home. Just lost that money, but no big deal. And ended up working in Australia, and I was gone for almost a year, not quite a year, but 6 weeks turned into a lot longer than I expected.
So I want to pause you because like, what was like at 2 weeks? Was there a specific moment? Was it a feeling? Like, what was the thing that was like, all right, we're not coming home? Like, what was that? Because like going from like you talk about the progression of that, right? Like you cancel, then 2 weeks in, you're like, we're staying, like we're going forever, like.
I I know, that's actually a good question. I'm not sure if there was one particular thing that would have prompted that decision. I think it's just this sort of feelings that it brings out in you. You know, there was this sense of like freedom. And for me, I think traveling was when I felt truly alive. That experience with that fitness class, that was like my first sense of really feeling connected to something, feeling that sense of community, feeling like I was actually had purpose of some sort. Because like I said, I was going through a lot of anxiety before that. And travel for me, that was like freedom and feeling alive on a whole other level. But it wasn't like all of a sudden, you know, I just had this like newfound confidence and I could do this. It was like still those like normal like fears and doubts and everything were still present. It was just like I was choosing to kind of want to explore this, to explore another way. And yeah, I vaguely remember being on the phone in somewhere in New Zealand and trying to get my money back for my flight, and then them saying like, no, it's not possible, and just having that like realization that's like, okay, it doesn't matter, you know, I don't want that to hold me back from like having this experience, and it just like things work out, you know, when you make that decision and you decide to go after that. And yeah, they definitely go through, you guys know, like you go through those like highs and lows, and when you are traveling and even when you make that decision, it's just like you kind of do start to battle like, oh, is this like the right thing, should I be going back home? And you know, for me too, like I was leaving a job that I love, and this was like the first time in my life that I was like actually felt very passionate about something, but I also knew that I needed to go and experience this, and all it did for me was actually just like enhance my career and my work. And when I came home, I was like seeing things in a different way, and that kind of like propelled me forward with my business, I think.
That's amazing. Well, isn't that kind of interestingly like similar to yours, because you did your 50 states, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you weren't just like, oh, I'm the most confident human being alive, like sleeping in, like, talk about that.
Oh yeah, I mean, AJ and I have a lot of similarities, I think. And yeah, which we'll get to, but no, I totally understand that. It's like you choose to make this decision to let go of a certain lifestyle that you're living, knowing that what is ahead of you is going to change your life in a greater way. And sometimes you don't even know like what that's going to do for you, but like when you say you have that moments while you're traveling where you just feel completely free, like I'm sure you can speak to this too, like hearing that like takes me back to like specific moments. For me, it's like Grand Tetons by myself, first night living out of my car alone, like got here, did it, made it, like no turning back now, you know, like moments like that. It's just like, okay, like here we are, we did it, we've made it, and to this specific point. And yeah, it was terrifying to leave my bed at 3 a.m. and say like I'm actually doing this. But in those moments, you realize that like you're gonna do, like you're not dead, you're alive, like you're still like pushing through it every day, and you're becoming stronger and more independent, and like you slowly gain those pieces of confidence that make you.
And it comes from very simple moments, I feel.
Oh my gosh,
traveling. Like, you know, I remember one time actually, I think it was in New Zealand, I was like on a bus full of people, and you know, me and Kara at the time were essentially the only Americans, and I remember we were like singing a song, it might have been Bohemian Rhapsody. And I just remember like I had this moment, I was like, this is fucking cool, you know, it's like people that don't necessarily speak the same language, but we're all just like connecting in a different country through music, you know, like riding on the bus, just like seeing these beautiful views and just like feeling very connected to things. And it's, for me, that's like those moments of feeling alive, of being alive, have come from very like simple moments. And
it's like, go for it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, this year, which we'll dive more into when I went to Portugal. Like, it was just, I remember, I think the last 4 days, like, I think I slept like 8 hours. But I was still had probably the most energy out of anyone. I was like,
you really?
Yeah, I know. I was like, but like for me, it was like, you know, I broke down all these stories, and I think there's this quote, I'll butcher it, but basically it's like when the courageous man steps in the face of fear, it realizes that like you can pull the beard off, and it was never what you thought it was. Like it's almost like the Wizard of Oz. Like it's the freaking tiny man. Like that's what that was. Like
I know.
I saw you when you were like doing these New Zealand, like all these trips you're talking about. Like again, we've talked this multiple times. You were my inspiration for that. And it took me a lot longer to break down those walls. But then I got there and was like, what the fuck was I? What was I waiting on?
Yeah.
Like, this is like, I mean, it all happened in the perfect timing. Like, I truly believe that. But it was just kind of this belief of like, what was I doing? You know, like, what was this all about? Like, this is so easy. Like, I'm bored. Like, I can do this.
And it's kind of like when you do it, you're like, I can't believe I was going to let that doubt and my own limitation, because like essentially that's all it is. We're creating that limitation, but we're gonna let that hold us back from having that experience. And when you do, when you break through that, and it's gonna occur again. You know, you're gonna go through those stuff again. But you have that experience now, and I really do think like once you've expanded your mind to have an experience like that, it's very difficult to go 100% back to that old way of thinking.
Oh yeah.
You know, so you have that time to call upon and be like, hey, remember when I did that and it wasn't as scary as I thought. I just kind of like leaned into the doubt and fear and went for it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And it's always like you have these little, whether it's traveling or whether it's jumping into business, like whatever it is you're doing, like you always have these like little reminders of like safety and like security when you're feeling like everything could be falling apart, or like you're feeling terrified. Like I remember just like being alone traveling one time and running into like a bunch of people from New York, and I was like, okay, so like there's people from New York, that's like 5 hours from my home, so like I'm basically home. You know what I mean? It's like always just like these little things that like give you a reminder of like, I'm not alone in whatever it is I'm doing.
Do you
my
think?
gosh,
Do you guys think too? Like, and this is like probably, I mean, you're still in your 20s, but I know you have a lot of experience. But do you feel like I feel like entering my 20s was like this like just like blind arrogance and confidence, at least on my part, and I was like, but I was also like, I like put on this face of like, oh, I got this, but like underneath I was like terrified, like a lot of your 20s was like, for me it was like, and then you get to like now it's like I feel like I'm here, and like, and this has kind of been like the latter part of my 20s has been like, it's been like more of a like, it's cool, man, it's gonna be okay. Like, do you feel that? Like, it's just like I feel like these things, like I have faith and believe that everything like happens for a reason, right? Like that, even though this looks like very destructive, like it's probably just clearing paths for something better. Like that's how I look at things now. I'm not like, oh my god, my life's falling apart. I'm like, all right, like I'm just like, what are we creating a path for there, Spirit? You know, like, do you feel that? I'm just curious, like to get that perspective.
I think you start to, at least in my experience, you no longer kind of let those specific emotions sort of define you or give so much meaning to them. You know, I kind of now, when I am experiencing something like anxiety or depression, you know, sort of like what we've kind of dubbed as like an unwanted emotion, I feel like rather than being like, this is who I am, and taking myself like far down the rabbit hole, although like at times I've caught myself doing that, I feel like it's more this sort of acceptance and kind of understanding. And like what you were saying, we never know what is necessarily good or bad. That's really just our perception of it. And it could be something that's clearing you out for something even brighter and better. And what's that Rumi quote where it's like, this human being is a guest house. It's like, welcome it all in. You know, essentially it's being sent from a guide of
I know,
it's kind of like what you were saying, you know, sorrow, invite them all in. And you've probably heard that term before, we kind of like lean into the emotion, the experience, rather than resisting it. And just start to get a little bit more curious. At least that was towards probably like later part of my 20s. I started to, rather than like resist everything, and kind of just started to lean into things and get a little bit more curious. And that, I think, is more of my approach now.
Yeah.
Rather than it like consuming me and being like, this is who I am.
Yeah. I think like for me, I think my approach in like my early 20s especially was like curiosity, but like in a way of like searching for something. Like I remember one of my mom's friends asking her one time, because I was just like all over the place, and she was like, what is like Michaela looking for? Like what is she searching for? And I never really like understood that, but coming back like to where I am now in my life, like I recognize that I wasn't searching for anything other than like me, like what was like inside of like myself, you know. And like really what I came back to was like all of the things that I was looking for already exist like inside of me. Like I already have all of those answers that I was looking for. But I think the curiosity is kind of what like sparked those like different adventures and experiences.
Yeah.
So I mean, okay, where were you after New Zealand?
I went to Australia for,
Okay.
and then I ended up going back to the States, and that's when I started to launch a lot of my programs, my outdoor classes and events, and I started to create a little bit of a lifestyle of being able to travel and study and work in different regions of the world, and then also work with clients and establish my programs and events back on the seacoast. And
Can we go back to
and wild
Australia?
rides came.
Can we go back to Australia real quick? Because I remember in your email you said you were a telemarketer. And I could never
Oh my God,
picture you doing that,
yes.
so please talk about that.
Kara and I were.
Like-
Kara was more of a telemarketer. Kara's my sister, but more of a telemarketer than I was. We worked at Roy Morgan Research, and you know, we're the people that made you essentially take surveys and ask different questions, and I ended up breaking down at that job. I remember.
Really?
Yeah, but it was like a pretty kind of like gnarly survey experience that we had there. And I remember they took like a small group of us, and they're just like, look, this is going to be a bit of a heavy one. And it was actually about sexual abuse in the workplace in Australia. And I like lost it on the phone. Like lost it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
So I was like, it's interesting because a telemarketing experience also left me with like an experience that I feel like I won't forget either.
Wow.
And that I think that also like fed into this concept for me, especially like returning home, to have a community, especially women, that we can like support each other and stuff. That
That's awesome.
experience was, yeah. But yes, I was a telemarketer
Yeah,
for a
That's
small little stint there.
How did your outlook on community, because you're from this area,
Mm-hmm.
it's like how did your outlook on this specific community, like the Seacoast community, change before you left to when you kind of came back, or even how you feel about it now?
Yeah, I think when I first returned, I was a little resistant to. Did you ever have the experience like when you come back to the States and after having sort of experience abroad, you feel disconnected, even in a place that's your own? And that was kind of my take on it when I would first return. And I remember it kind of just hit me at one point that like I was disconnecting from myself and from others, versus like once I started to change the intention that I had with this community, it was like I started to meet people that also had that view of life. And a lot of like all of my friends, you know, they're entrepreneurs, they're all doing their own thing, and it was really cool to just see that community start to kind of flourish here. But yeah, Wild Vibes was essentially started from both this like inspiration and a bit of this desperation here in this community, because we were so inspired by all of the creatives and all the insanely talented artists and musicians and holistic practitioners here. It's really like a wealth of knowledge on the Seacoast, but we also felt just like a little segregated. Like it didn't really feel like the communities were kind of like meshing with one another. And you know, Maggie and I had both returned to the Seacoast and sort of newly yoga teachers, and not really sure where we fit in. And we just kind of like, actually the first time Maggie and I officially met each other, that's how the conversation of Wild Vibes was born. We knew of each other before, but she had reached out to me once it was like Facebook or something, and she was just like, oh, I saw you're a yoga teacher, would love to like get together and talk ways on how we could work together. And we met at Pierce Island where the first Wild Vibes was held, and we just started dreaming up on the field. We were like, wouldn't it be cool? Like, wouldn't it just be really cool to have a day where we could all gather together? And you know, the two of us had experienced festivals like that before, and just like how that can totally change, like, and shift your entire perspective and experience just from having that. So that's really how Wild Vibes was born. So it was born out of both this really feeling very inspired, but also, like I was saying, this like inspiration and desperation, and this need to want to have this community all come together.
I love that.
That is just so cool. Like I didn't know that piece of the story, and I think that's so special because I think something I'm extremely grateful for is it seems like the Seacoast has, I guess you might be one of the leaders in this, has created this community of like where all these holistic practitioners musicians, these creatives, these yoga people, these whatever other things I'm not mentioning are like coming out of the woodworks.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just seems like more than any, I mean, obviously I haven't been to all the other places on earth, but it just feels like really special. Like we have this community of support, and it's like, I just feel like we have a community where you can be real.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, what do we do? Like Shelly's event, the flannel thing, we raised like what, 11 grand?
That was amazing.
That was insane. Like that's community.
Yeah.
You know, like how cool is that we came together, had an awesome event, like people got prizes, like had a great time, and then we raised 11 grand for charity. And it was like an amazing event. And
it's so cool to see all the different connections, you know. I mean, Wild Vibes is a cool one because it's like a yearly sort of milestone to be able to see, you know, our own growth.
Yeah.
So many different like beautiful life lessons for me through Wild Vibes, but also just to see the different connections that have been made, and to also see the businesses that have bloomed from that day or has kind of really taken off, and that's been really special to witness as well.
How has Wild Vibes like changed you as a person?
good question.
So much. I mean, it's a hard one for me to put into words because obviously my partnership with Maggie, she's like one of the most special people to me, and totally like up until that point, I didn't really understand like the power of collaboration, and yeah, and you know, just like taking a chance on that and just seeing how much more creative and powerful that we can be when we do this stuff together, and that in itself has been really truly, and it sounds so cliche, but I feel like it's been so life-changing for me on so many levels. And yeah, I think it also and it continues to do, it inspires me and instills this sense of like capability and confidence and connection, and yeah, honestly, Wild Vibes instills a lot of those feelings for me, and it's a hard one to put into words.
I know.
It really is.
Well, let me help you.
Okay.
Like, all right. So,
Sean, how is that?
so I want to talk about Wild Vibes because definitely like holds a special place here for me, because I feel like you came back with the intention to create community and more centered around like women, especially after your experiences, right? But as a man, you know, I was going through throughout my 20s was just this constant up and down with like anxiety, depression, like trying to deal with how to hone ADHD and all these other things. Even got bipolar thrown in there at one point. And I was so ashamed of that. Like I felt like there was something wrong with me, and like, you know, we were friends. I hid it for a long time, and then like I started to open up, and you know, Ankati helped me with that. But like I kind of came into this Wild Vibes community where it's like, dude, we're just humans. And like I felt supported there, and like I felt like I could just be myself, and it was okay. And like I slowly kind of, through the community you guys created, like yourself and like many of the other, really it was women, I'm just gonna say it, like I felt supported and held and like allowed to be who I was, and it allowed me to create like an emotional language for myself, which helped me thrive. And it's like, so this one event not only gives to the community, but it like gave so much to me, and like I've been able to come full circle. Obviously, like last year I was like the lawnmower guy, I was doing all the things, and like it felt so good to give that back, because it's like it really transformed my perception of myself. Like, oh, like even if I'm depressed and feel like a loser inside, like people still welcome me and like hold space for me, and it's okay. Yeah. And like that was, I mean, at a time where like, I mean, you know, you guys both know, so I had like suicidal thoughts. It's like, holy shit, like that was life changing. You know what I mean? So like that for me, like that one event of like community, you know, and like that was, it got reinforced this year through like the retreat too. Like that like love and alignment I felt like at Wild Vibes this year in Portugal. It's like I just came back and like literally I quit everything. It's like, fuck this job, this is going out, done. And I'm like, business, podcast, let's go, community.
That's not really what you're supposed to do, people.
Yeah, no, seriously. That's
a little extreme
I got
over here.
I got some screws loose, like they said, like this kind of thing. So probably wouldn't recommend that. But yeah, I mean,
no,
it really did. Like I came back and I sat in my desk chair and realized how out of alignment my entire life was after experiencing Wild Vibes. And I was like, okay, we gotta make some changes.
Yeah, well, I mean, Wild Vibes for me was like my like probably like first step into being involved in the community here that has become like my favorite part of my life. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this community has changed my life so greatly. And I mean, when I was working at Profile, like I was literally commuting an hour every day to work at a freaking coffee shop. Like kind of crazy because I was like planning on moving up here. I was working 2 different part-time jobs to thinking about moving to Portsmouth. Like it was kind of crazy, but I like knew when I would wake up at like 4 a.m. every morning that there was a reason I was like driving up before the sun rose to work at a coffee shop in a town that was like an hour away from me. Do you know what I mean? And I think obviously like meeting you and like being a part of Wild Vibes was one of those reasons that I like did this crazy thing. Like I just know as like starting at that time in my life, I was just starting my business, like just starting my photography business.
Yeah.
And Wild Vibes was such a like empowering like entrance into starting my business just by having the photographs and the content that I created that day and like having those like photos shared. Like I feel like when I met you, you were like, oh like yeah, like you I saw like your name
I knew
like,
you because of Wild Vibes.
Because of Wild Vibes. And I feel like that was like so many things escalated because of that event for me with like being a part of this community.
It's cool to see that people collaborate, you know, especially like all of you guys that are photographers, like such good friends, you support each other, and that's what we wanted, you know, that's what we want that day to feel like, is just like supportive of each other and
like no competition by any means.
Yeah.
Within like industry, like Monica, like Raya, like Emily, all of us, like we're all good friends and we all support one another, but we all essentially have the same job.
It's the coolest. Thank you for saying that, because it was in my mind. Like, I look at all the yoga people, all the photographers, all the, I want to say inspirational speakers, but I think I'm the only one. But anyway, like, it's about building each other up and realizing, like, literally, like, there's abundance. Like, I don't have to chop your knees off. And, like, I did sales jobs, and, like, it wasn't always that environment, but it's just, like, it's so cool to watch, like, there's like however many photographers you hire on staff, and they're all like laughing, like ooh, like laying down, like ooh, like all these suggestions. You're like, yeah, and then you're like, oh, I'm on camera.
I don't think I was
Wow.
doing that either.
All right, well, whatever. I know at one point when me and Pat were like eye to eye, we had like photographers like all in our deals.
That was one of my favorite, like the feedback we received from this year was like someone was like the parking guys. And I was like, and I was like, yes, like every part of Wild Vibes, like every role is just so important, you know, and it all like, I just love that feedback. Where it's like the part, like we entered the festival, it was like the parking guys, like we're so excited to be there, and I was like, shut up, Pat.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's just like, let's go, you know.
Yeah, that's so. I love giving the opportunity for people to like Sierra and Lauren, Shay, and Kristen, and Shelby, Monica, all of you guys to be able to have this place to where you feel like you can really kind of like run wild with your creative ideas, and you know, just like the healing sanctuary and like Sierra,
let's give Sierra like
my
ride or
God,
die, like badass.
that girl will literally do everything, and you know, Justin, like we have music because Justin came on, and Shelby with the Dreamers Den, like it's just. Those are all their ideas, and to be able to see like them bring that to life has been so amazing for us. And I'm probably forgetting people, but there's been so many special people that have really brought that thing to life, and that's why it's like me and Maggie, I was like, this is so much bigger than us, you know. It's been amazing to see this idea really flourish into something that other people can connect to. And
was there any fear, or like, do you have any fear about like, I mean, like taking Wild Vibes like international, like that's a huge step too. Like, what like fears go on through your head, like through like any part of your life, like through Wild Vibes, through your own business, like what fears come into play? How do you kind of like work with those?
Yeah, you know, I think kind of like weirdly my natural instinct is to kind of want to doubt myself a little bit. I've done quite a bit of work around that, but I've recognized that a lot of the fears are just that own, like my own doubt within, of course, like, will this work? Like, is anyone gonna like it? And that still goes through my head with anything, you know, if I put out a new program or we kind of like step it up a notch with Wild Vibes. And it's been so helpful to have someone like Maggie as a business partner in that, and we get to like do this together and be like, let's come back to our intention, let's come back to our why. And that's something that I always think about for myself too. You know, what is my why behind this? You know, what is my intention. And again, I don't want to like deprive myself of this experience because of a doubt or fear. But yeah, absolutely. Honestly, like every time like before I book a plane ticket, I still have those fears and doubts. I just decide to kind of like lean into them and kind of do it anyways. And at times that doubt has helped me back. And if I could go back at all, I don't regret necessarily any sort of path that I took, but I'd like to be able to be like, I wish I would spend so much time worrying about it. Because look at like nothing to worry about once you do it.
Well, I think that's the definition of courage. So we're sitting amongst a very courageous woman here, folks. Like literally, it's like feeling the fear and moving forward in light of it.
Yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt has a quote surrounding that, but I'm not going to butcher it. But that's basically the precipice of it. Is like courage is like not the absence of fear; it's feeling the fear and going forward anyway.
Yeah.
And I mean that's all life is. Like I think like if we're talking to some younger people, I think this is a great point to talk about that. Like there's never like a getting there. There's never a absence of fear. You might get brief seconds of like silence in your mind, but really like the fear is always going to come up. Like as you evolve, as you ascend to different levels, it just comes up in a different manifestation. So as you get the experience, it's like you just learn to like feel it and be like, okay, I see you. Like you honor it. Like, all right, lean in. Like, all right, I feel you. But guess what? I'm a badass, and we're gonna just keep going forward.
Yeah.
Like I had that recently where it was like the paralyzing anxiety. Like you wake up in your bed and you're like, oh, like what is going on, bro?
And I think it's important to give yourself space, and whether that's through the practice of meditation, whatever that ritual looks like, because I think that's where a lot of like the deep listening can come into play. It's not always like this necessarily big revelational like clarity is like instilled in you, but you can listen, and I do think that is the birthplace really of creation, is having that space and then acting on it. I really do think the clarity and the capability starts to become instilled in you when you start to actually move, like take action. It's like just do it. Nike nails it with them. Like just do it.
Sponsor us.
Just do it. There's also, what is that? I forget the name of the movie now. I'm really forgetful with those things, but it's like a journey only assumes a meaning or has that purpose only after it's begun. And I love that because you can't just like sit there and wait for that place of being ready. You'll become ready when you actually start to create that momentum, that movement, and you just do it. Just put it out there. Like test it out a little bit.
Well, I think it's honestly like there's that quote about diamonds, right? Diamonds are forged under high pressure, right? So like if you just sit in comfort and wait to be ready, you're never going to be ready. But if you throw yourself in it, like there is a sink or swim. Like my failure is really, I'm going to raise my hand up. I've done that multiple times, but through doing that, it's just been the next building block and giving me the experience for that next experience, and I handle it better. And like right now, like honestly, like I'm going through a lot of stuff. I won't like tap into too much of it, but there's just like experiences I've had that have given me the space to be where I'm at and still like continue to walk forward in faith and confidence that it's gonna work out, instead of like quitting because of the doubt or the fear or the whatever else is involved. It's just like I've been able to, through practices, like tap into like, okay, this is like what my heart wants. Like I'm like, this is the first time in my life, like I'm like, okay, this is what this wants. And so like that's worth following. And like I think the outer perceptions aren't as important anymore. Like it is, it's like Pam said it, right? Like on episode 2, like it's like success is like a feeling, right? Or purpose is the feeling. Like what's that why? It taps into here, and it just gives you that ability to just keep marching forward regardless of what's going on out here.
Yeah, I think it's a creation of it. I don't think there's ever necessarily the arrival point to ready. I think, or even that success, unless you define it in a certain way, it's really you creating it for yourself.
What does success mean to you?
You've asked me this before.
Yeah.
Shoot.
What does it not mean to you, AJ?
I think I'm going to say this one because I'll tie it back in with New Zealand. I think I've said this to you before. What was actually really cool on my first trip in New Zealand, we were given that like a little book of of course all the different sites and stuff to see in New Zealand, but there was the Kiwi lingo, and one of it was to be away laughing, and it was to have success or be well on your way of being successful. And I think it's just that, like being in that state of contentment and being true to yourself and staying with your why, your intention behind things. You know, I think you can redefine success at any time and tap into it anytime.
I like that.
Can I ask you a question? So it's surrounding that is, have you ever had a moment where like on the outside, like it looked great, but in here you were dying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I think I was telling you guys this in a little bit about my story. Yeah, you know, on the outside, I essentially had established this dream lifestyle for myself and doing things that I never thought that I could claim to have as a title or something that I was even capable of doing. And the job that I loved, the fact that I could travel and I've been my own boss for like the last decade, amazing community. But I had at some point in my 20s developed again pretty debilitating anxiety and depression, and it came knocking really hard this time and also showed up in different health issues, but I resisted it for so long, and I think that I resisted this sort of like inner world. You know, I don't think I had ever actually addressed like the solid foundation of moving from a place of love and kindness and grace and understanding with myself. And over time, when you're not operating from that place, like those outside success or achievement stuff, they do start to define you. You know, you kind of like attach yourself to those things, or you recognize like, okay, that's not where you're gonna find your sense of purpose or happiness. And yeah, so it was like crazy because I was traveling to all of these different places, but honestly, like one of like the craziest journeys and one that I just never taken before was really kind of like diving deep within. And I popped myself down one winter and stayed put in New Hampshire and got to the root of that. And I recognized that, I really needed to move from that place, and I hadn't been. But it was interesting because I believed it so much for everyone else. It just took me a while to catch up with that and actually put those practices.
So how old were you?
Play.
Like
I'd say it was like, the health issues started probably around like 25, 26.
Okay.
But it wasn't that long ago. It was right before I went to Sri Lanka where I really started to heal myself. I went there.
Do you?
No, go. What did that process look like? Like that healing process?
It was kind of all over the map at first, because at first I thought, I really focused on the external, which part of it was. It also like that's a whole other story in terms of our like Western approach to medicine. So there was that, and it's kind of almost like that diet mentality. We want that like quick fix, and like I started to do that with my health. Like I was like, at some point I was just kind of like, yes, just tell me something, whatever it is that I can fix, and so it's kind of all over the map for a couple of years, and then it came knocking pretty hard, and it was actually right before I was about to lead my first international retreat, and that's something that's been a dream of mine for a while. And the fact that I almost didn't go on it was, I think very telling to me. I was at a place where I feel like I was kind of losing faith in things, and I knew that like deep down that wasn't me. But I knew that I had to address it. And, interestingly enough, when I went on that retreat, I'm so supported, of course, by Maggie and Lauren and our retreat guests. And this was, again, we're in this place of community and sharing and support with one another. And it was like all of my symptoms subsided. And then I came back home, had the symptoms again. And I started to actually lean on my community. I started a meditation practice like never before, very consistent with it. And I started to actually believe in a new way about myself. And I took that notion on through meditation. And I remember all I said that winter to myself was like, just show up. That was the only sort of like pressure I put on myself, was to just show up no matter what that looked like that day. And I started to be a little more open about it with people. Also being somebody that is in the health and fitness industry, you put a lot more pressure on. It's like, well, who am I? You start to doubt if you're adequate enough to be doing this, if you're going through that. But honestly, I recognized that it was able to help people so much more. There's so many other people going through the same thing, and really kind of like leaning on community. I don't think we we give that like act of like being open and being vulnerable enough credit for its power to heal. And then oddly enough, I ended up in a country that was like very rooted in loving kindness, and my purpose over there was like pure service and just to be. I didn't need to like create the next thing. I wasn't worried about what program I was going to create or this or that. And I just feel like I came back, and even my doctor was like, holy, I was really kind of healed from a lot of that stuff, and I recognized the power of belief and what that can do for your state of being.
So. Oh my gosh, there's just so much gold in there. So I have a question for you, and I don't know if anyone's ever asked you this. So I know recently we've talked about, this was like last year, you talked about, I honestly think we were driving around trying to look for spots for Wild Vibes, and you were telling me about how, I don't remember what?
Like 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I don't remember exactly who it was. Like you had talked to someone, and they talked to you about like, well, AJ, like, what if you plant roots here or something? And like, I feel like, do you feel like, because just hearing your story, I feel like I've like played this out in my head, is like, do you feel like your younger 20s was almost an aspect of like trying to run away from this? And then it's like you slowly like your inner row was just like knocking on the doorstep, like, hey, come on, lady. And then all of a sudden, it seems like you've done a lot of this healing. Granted, like you did in Sri Lanka and you did in different places, but as much as I've known you, this seems like the most like grounded in one place, and like you want to create roots here and want to create community. And like, as long as I've known you, that seems like a completely different like AJ, you know. So
I know it's still funny when people are like, "Where are you traveling to? You're still here this winter."
Yeah.
Someone said that to me younger than that.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
yeah, everyone's like, "Hey, AJ's here."
I think it's more like accepting and entering into whatever evolution or like season of life you're being brought into. And I do think, we can create a little bit of suffering from holding on to the different titles or way of life. For so long I was AJ, this like free-spirited traveler, and that's how people knew me. And if I wasn't doing that, I was like, who am I? And I knew like in those times of transition, that was when I had a lot of like anxiety but no, I don't think I have been asked that quite a bit. It's like, what are you running away from? And I don't think it's that. I don't ever really necessarily think it was this like journey of finding myself. I just think it was experiences that I truly like needed to have, and they were the things that also helped instill these different beliefs for myself. And there was a little bit of a time period when I was, I think, evolving into maybe the season that you guys are seeing me in now, of being a little bit having more roots, more grounding in my life. But before that, it felt like things were a little shaky. It was like everything you thought you knew, kind of just like, it's like having the rug pulled right out of you, And like that time, it feels like it kind of just like breaking down, right? But I just feel like it's kind of get you into this next evolution, this next phase. I keep saying that, but I don't know what else to really kind of call it. It's just, and when you start to accept that, you start to like open up to things that you never thought before, and it can be really beautiful.
One of my favorite things that you've said is, I think you call it like, other than that time you told me all the coffees that you don't like. No, one of my favorite things that you said is, I think you say racking up the experience.
Rack up
all the experiences.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that I tried so hard to like communicate before, but you said it so perfectly in those words. And can you just speak a little bit to that? I think off of even what you just said, like whether it's like traveling, whether it's in your business, whatever it is, just kind of like racking up this experience. It's like, what does that mean?
I think allowing yourself to have the experience, really. For me, at the end of the day, I wanna be able to say that I've given myself permission to have the experiences I've wanted to have in life, and to try it out, and to get curious with it and explore and treat it like that. I think so much we can start to deprive ourselves of the experience, whether it's the fear of the unknown, whether it's this idea of this is what society thinks we need to be doing, or the sort of like pressures we put on ourselves. And so for me, it's like, rack up those experiences.
Well,
what it looks like.
I think that's so awesome, because it's like I picture, actually there is a rocking chair over there. I wish I could bring it here, but I picture like 85-year-old me sitting in the rocking chair, like still lively and full of energy with like one child here, one child here, and being like, well, little Timmy, there was that time I was in the Serengeti with African lions, and you know, like you said, racking up those experiences, like that's what makes life interesting. And honestly, it's a connection point. Like I've found in my life, like we were talking about this before, like we're good connectors, right? So I can connect with people because of all the like life experiences I've had, and it just gives you like that connection point to someone. And it's like I just like I think there's so much beauty in that. Like when you look back on life, like there's like a Kohler commercial or something. There's like some old grandma. It's a Kohler. It's like a brand of like bathtub or something. And there's this old grandma. Like maybe this is where my rocking chair thing comes. I'm a little bit nuts on this right now, but she's just sitting there like, oh, I've done too many things. And like she's talking about all those experiences. And I was like, safe, look at that laugh. Yeah, but like that's what I picture is like just life experiences, story. Yeah. Okay, podcast. But it's just like just being able to share those with people, because I think like in that in itself is like almost a permission slip or a slip or an inspiration, because it's like the same thing. I mean, you were doing it and it was like all over social media and stuff, but it's like, damn, like I want to fucking do that. That looks way better than like mowing lawns. You know what I mean? Like, and it took so much to break that, but you were like that permission slipper. You were like this is possible.
Yeah, I think, kind of goes back to that notion, like anyone can do anything, but you also have to think about like what are you willing to sacrifice, and to also know like this stuff isn't easy. It's also it's hard. I don't think that's talked about enough, but that doesn't make you any less of a coach, a fitness instructor, a photographer, a speaker. If you go through these periods of like harder times, and that is life. Like there's this really beautiful like duality to all of life, and it's not talked about enough, I think. And I know for me that was a big thing, is like where I was saying before, it's like I question, like who's gonna want to work with me because I'm feeling these things. And I think all it's done is really it's made me stronger, and it's allowed me to relate more to clients or people I've worked with, and been able to put more like intention behind the work that I do. And yeah, where was I going with this book?
I don't know.
I was talking about a Kohler
Well,
grandma.
I was saying, I think like, yeah, honestly, you can do it, and I think it's just allowing yourself to believe in a new way. And it really does. It starts with that awareness of what's currently going on, and believing in a different way for yourself, and then making that decision going after it. But also know like there's going to be that sacrifice to come with that, and what are you willing to sacrifice to also be able to live in that capacity? Going along with that, like glamorous and maybe all over social media.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sacrifice that
Yeah,
came with
of course.
10 years of traveling,
Absolutely.
not having a home, not always having a car. But more than those things too, it's just like not being able to have a consistent community, and it gets very lonely sometimes on the road, and lots of sacrifice for both things, running your own business, and I wouldn't change it. It's a lot of cool things too. I relate to Grandma on the Rock.
Sure.
Well,
I was gonna. What was I gonna say?
Well, I think like it's coming back to like the relatability thing. Like I know for me it was like I want to have like the cool experiences to relate to people, but I also want to like have these like hard experiences too, to be able to like sit down and have these like real conversations with people and like relate with the person who's been through X, Y, and Z that sucked, not just like the person that went on this cool trip. Definitely.
Well, and I think, I know you're not so much on the social media, but like even for you, and then for me, and I'm gonna call out Ankati. Ankati, if you're watching, was kind of my original inspiration for this. Is that like, so I recently saw something that said, like 50 years ago, you would get X amount of information, but like today, one day on social media for kids, they get the same amount of information that you got in like 50 years. Like, or something crazy like that. Like that's one day, and you can't escape it. Like a kid goes home, and it's like we used to be like, oh, I did school, and like, oh, high school's kind of hard, but at least I like go home and like shut everything off and like lock myself in my room if I want, or whatever it is. You can't escape it now, and it's like I don't want to create a world where which is this is what I did. It's like, okay, like here's all my rainbows, and like when it gets tough, I'll just disappear off of Instagram, and oh, it's good again. So now we can start posting all the cool stuff. Like I want to post both. Like you said, it's about duality. It's about being authentic. Like, and being authentic means like, yeah, I went to Bali, but like I had an emotional breakdown.
Cheers to that.
But I took a cool picture on a beach, so it looks awesome, you know. So I think it's just about that. And I mean, I think for young people, anyone out there, when you're making these like jumps, right, these leaps of faith, like obviously that initial like excitement is so cool, and then you dive in, and like 5 minutes later, you're like, oh, this just got real, and like it hits you, and it's like, I think we talk about these these entrepreneurs, almost self-made millionaire, which in my opinion is complete fucking bullshit. But it's about finding that
community.
All
alone, people.
Yeah, leaning on community and finding those people, because I think when you take these leaps outside of what like the so-called norm is, there is that alienation. There is like that element of alienation, and it's because they went an hour.
Keep going.
There is that element of alienation. I think it's so super important to find these communities. And sometimes that's hard to do, and like it's not always available, and sometimes it means just create.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's what's so cool about like your story is just how like you created all this. And now I know it's like early, and we're probably like 6 months away, but when's the next Wild Vibes? When's the next Wild Vibes retreat?
So I don't schedule a wedding on it.
Yeah,
the
like,
festival day is still in the works. We'll be launching that with probably the first of the new year. And we're going to Bali. We're already halfway full with that. So that is May 5th through 12th. Bali, Indonesia, Wild Vibes Retreats. Maggie and myself will be leading that. So we've got a few spots left if anyone wants to join us. And then we'll also be going to Zion National Park in October too.
So good.
Releasing
Check
details
it,
on that
people.
soon.
Do you know what month
Zion's
Wild Vibes
magical.
Festival is it gonna be?
It's either the end of June or beginning of July.
Alright, so just like be that on your radar.
Keep all of
peeps.
your
Yes.
Saturday.
And if you're interested in participating,
Yeah, volunteers. I'm gonna be
Highly
doing the
recommend.
lawn mowing. If you need, might need a few guys there, so you know, keep it in the works. Do we have anything else other than
Yeah.
what else? I mean, we're like over an hour.
I know.
Maggie.
What are you
I know.
doing?
I don't want to leave.
I don't either.
Well, let's.
Well, what do you think a wild heart
Yeah.
is? That's how we always say.
What?
No, I didn't know. Like, what's the green mean?
Those are
People
just
have joined.
peeps like joining
Oh,
and watching.
that the comment.
Yeah, there just might be comments in there.
Oh, wild card.
Yeah. What is?
Yeah, what's
what
a
does
wild card,
mean
AJ?
to you, AJ?
What does that mean? Well, we at Wild Vibes define wild as your natural state, sort of natural essence. So when you're able to strip away all the labels, the titles, expectations, you know, what is true? What is your true essence? I do think we all have that true essence of the natural state is one of joy and love and peace. And I think there's a definition I've heard of wild once that was really cool. It's like unrestrained, especially in the pursuit of pleasure. You know, so when you're free of restraints, what is it that you would be guided by following? And do you think a wild heart is one that follows whatever answer that is? That makes sense?
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
I love that.
That's just like
That's our new definition.
that's me. Like I just had like some like feelings and stuff. Like, oh. Yeah, I don't know. I know. I can't even tell you. Like maybe should I just leave? Okay.
Just leave.
Honestly.
I do like that.
Well, I think that's like.
Yeah. Is there anything that you feel like you need to add that you haven't told the people? We would keep your
Yeah,
And
life
you guys, I've got a new program starting January 7th with my friend Lindsay James.
So good.
Commit to Shift Round 2. If you're ever interested in working with me as a holistic fitness trainer, just any of the stuff that we talked about, got anything going on, shoot me a message. And what other programs?
Well, yeah, but can't you win like some dope prize? Isn't that like a competition?
Yeah,
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Commit to Shift's really
It's
awesome. We'll
amazing.
meet 2 times a week in a group fitness setting. And then Lindsay and I provide different weekly movement and mindset challenges, and we're all in it as a group together. That's probably like the coolest part is the community aspect. You know, we're all supporting each other all week long, and then at the end we do have a cool grand prize. That's offered to the winner based off of like all of your check-ins, and so yeah, we hold each other accountable, and it's just really fun. You'll learn a lot too.
It's like a crazy prize.
Yeah, we had a lot of good
Like
prizes from
crazy.
so many incredible brands and businesses and individuals in the community. Yeah.
All right.
Join us.
Final-
Space for that too.
Final question for you.
Oh, geez.
This is gonna be a good one. What is
I don't know
one
what's
thing?
going on this now.
What is one? Look at you like leaning back crazy.
That was the one that I don't have an answer to.
No, I think you will. What is one thing you would tell your 21-year-old self?
Oh.
I've already kind of touched on that. One thing I would tell myself, well, I think I would have given myself some of the tools and practices that are now a huge part of my life, that have brought me into that state more of acceptance and just a different view of life. I don't know, but like, don't worry, when you hear that from other people at that age,
okay.
But that is one thing, if I could kind of go back and be able to instill that idea of like, you don't need to worry, just do it, Just do it.
If I could turn back time.
Oh, I wanted to just belt out the next word. I didn't.
Tell your 21-year-old self.
Something very similar, like, because I remember actually, Maggie, if you're watching, which I think you are, and I actually told her this recently, if she reached out, and I was like, yeah, remember that, like, so we had met, it was for Wild Lives, it was like one of the, like, pre-party, like, volunteer meetings, and it was at her place in Rye, and so it was maybe, like, year 3?
Yeah.
I think it was 3. And I was just like in the throes of just shit, like super depressed. Like I was just like, obviously at that time that was like a big thing. I was like, oh yeah, here we go. And I remember like just kind of explaining where I was, and Maggie's like, oh yeah, like I remember that. Yeah, you're like totally where you're supposed to be. It's gonna be all good. And I was like, I remember being mad at her. I was like,
So
no,
simple.
it's not. No, it's not. Like I was like, my head, and then it's all just trickled exactly how it was. And I think it's like I've heard this, and I think it's kind of cliche, but it's like I feel like life's just like jumping on the surfboard and riding the wave. Sometimes it's like a tsunami wave, sometimes it's a little wave, and it's just about riding it. Like you can either try and, like I've done this, like try and swim as hard as you can against it, but like that force is gonna crush you every single time and you resist it. But if you just like you're like, okay, woo, all right.
Yeah. That reminds me of when I was in Indonesia and I was learning to surf with it from my friend who was in Australia, Josh, if he's watching this. So he's obviously a really good surfer. I remember it was like, have you surfed in Indonesia?
No.
It's like a little crazy if you're a beginner, but I was just getting like, like the washing machine, like
Oh
all
my
over the
gosh.
place. And it was like, just let the ocean have you, just like let the ocean have you, and it's like stop resisting it so much. And I always remember that because when I did, it was like I floated to the surface versus having all this like chaos and
That's really cool.
That's so true.
That's cool. What would you tell yourself?
My 21-year-old self?
Yeah, sure. Maybe 20, 22.
Why does 21 seem too recent?
Why
did you like change the age for
Wait,
me?
so you understand.
Why would you tell your 12-year-old self?
I
Yeah, no, I think I would tell my 21-year-old self to, I was really good, I think, at like covering up feelings that I had, like covering things up with whether it was like partying or like putting on like this fake facade of like happiness, and like I was really good at being like the jokester in the group, and like I think I would tell I would like to have a meditation practice back then, and I think I would tell my 21-year-old self to just like sit with the feelings, and not try to like put on a mask over them, and not try to lean into this version of yourself that you think that you need to be in order to gain approval and like validation from the people that aren't really your people. So I think just kind of leaning into not the person that you think you're supposed to be, but the person that like feels right.
Yeah.
Like really feels
Do we
good.
all ever have it figured out?
No.
I think that's the other thing too. We put a lot of time into that. Yeah, I think meditation. If I had access to those things back then, or just like what we've been talking about, like this knowledge that it's like okay to feel all those different things, that would have been a game changer back then.
I couldn't agree. I mean, like I know for like meditation is #1 arsenal, right? Like #1 tool I pull out. That's the thing that gets me back on track. I mean, I think too, like talking about leaning in. I make this joke all the time, so I just want to like make this a thing. It's like when you're bowling, you got like the bumpers, right?
This is a bowl? What was that?
When you're
I was
bowling.
like, why am I so bad at bowling?
My high school dance move. used to come with you. They could always find me in a crowd. And I'm like,
But like that's your emotions, right? Like those are your emotions are keeping you in alignment. Like think about a bowling lane. Like your chakra lane is like straight down the center. It's like when you go outside of that and you feel anger, okay, now you found something that's really important. You have boundaries been crossed. Like lean into that. See what that's about. Not like resist it. Like, oh, I shouldn't be angry, because I think conditioning teaches you what like every single one of us has like, oh, anger was okay in my family, but sadness wasn't. Or sadness was okay, but you're not allowed to be angry. Or you can't get too excited. You know, so it's like breaking all that shit down. Like listen to your emotions, because for you individually, that's your soul. Like that's your alignment system. And when you go outside that, that's trying to tell you something. If you resist it, you're not going to get the message. But if you lean in, you will. And coming from someone who is a stubborn fuck and just resisted everything, I just had to keep getting the same lessons.
You're an Aquarius?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm looking for an Aquarius man.
Oh.
Yeah. It's like my other half.
Oh.
Whoa, shit.
You know any?
And I'm the fire. And I'm the fire.
I'm the fire.
You guys, what are you talking about?
I'm fire.
You just said you were.
I'm a Leo.
Yeah, but what was the Aquarius?
Aquarius.
Yeah. Yeah, going back to people, I think
AJ's getting us
Just,
back on track because we're doing
taking on like the role of the observer.
Yeah.
You know, and not attaching yourself to
Oh, yeah.
the emotions. What's that? Have you guys ever read the children's stuff? The Shempa, she calls it. It's like the hook. And that's where it's like you get like you kind of go down the rabbit hole. It's like you give meaning versus just being able to like observe it. And there's, I think they say it's like 90 seconds. It's the lifespan of an emotion, and the only reason why it exists longer than that is because you actually kind of give it that power. So when you just really do come into that place of observation, you can change the behavior of something. You can utilize it in a really productive way for yourself, and recognize you don't have to like take on. You're having an experience maybe of anger, and if you can observe that and get curious with it, understand that you don't need to become the angry person. You know, become a party person.
Well, that's like the meditation, right? Is like, well, so this is a fun fact. You have the average human has 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. Isn't that ridiculous?
Oh my gosh.
So
I believe that.
imagine attaching to every single one of those. Like a lot of times, meditation it's scary, but it makes you aware of like sometimes you're being an asshole to yourself. You know what I mean? Like and then when you start getting awareness, like it's super. I think that was for me. Like you wake up and have this awareness, and it's like, holy, whoa, I don't want to be in there. That guy's a jerk. And then you work through that, and like you said, you finally just watch it float by. Like it's not me. There's that.
Do you have like a piece of advice for people who are like terrified to step into like start a meditation practice?
I say start very small and be consistent with it. For me, when I started to become really, really consistent with it, I just said 5 minutes a day. And what I did also do was that was going to be the first thing that I did. You know, I didn't allow myself to check social media, emails, anything like that. I just 5 minutes, and I had that little mantra for myself: just show up. And I think when you can approach it in that mentality and not feel like it needs to look like one thing or another, of course we're going to have thoughts that come into play. And actually, if you recognize that you're thinking, that is the act of meditation, you know, and you return to the breath. I always think just like breath is one of like a beautiful gateway to come into that place of meditation, just the observation of the breath. For so many of us, we don't even recognize that we're breathing or like take a deep breath in and what that can do. So yeah, start small and be consistent with it. And just know that it's going to look different. And there's so many different guided meditations too. Like I've utilized, I think you did too, the Insight Timer.
So good.
It's a really beautiful one.
You can even start with like a minute.
YouTube
a minute meditation. Like there's a minute to like 3 hour meditation.
Yeah. Have something. I always like to give people box breath. I think I've given you guys this one before. You breathe in for a count of 4. You hold the breath at the top for a count of 4. Breathe out for 4. Hold it at the bottom for 4, and that's like 16 seconds. You know, and you can come into that state of allowing yourself to come into a parasympathetic state. And yeah, start.
Yeah, my mom started doing that before she went to bed, and she said it helped her like fall asleep.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
There's so many things.
Have something that's like a ritual for you.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't need to look like a seated meditation. It could be a walking meditation. and outside in nature while you're drinking your cup of coffee, like setting your intention for the day, that's a game changer, I think, for me, when you just like put forth your intention, that you, how you want to move and speak about, go through about the day. And
well, and I think it's like too, like you guys taught us about this out in Portugal, and like some of my other practices, they like don't get attached. Like sometimes I get attached to it having to be a certain way, like, and if I miss X piece of my routine, like, oh, it's not gonna be as good or something. And it's like it really just comes down to the intention. The intention could literally be made in 10 seconds, and that could be like ultra powerful.
yeah,
You know, it's just find out what works for you, and yeah, I think starting small. I think it's so funny you said that. Was literally the exact words that I had in my mind, because I started with like, for me it was the state of like so much resistance and pain and suffering that I just was like, okay, like I give up. Just throw me the things and I'll try. And it was like meditation. I was like, I remember sitting up in my room like, am I doing it? And my like roommate too, of course, is like, what are you doing up there? I was like, meditating. And it was just like awkward, but it's like start small, stick with it, and it's for you. It's for you.
And it looks different for everyone.
Yeah.
Journaling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think we gotta cut ourselves off because I can talk to you. Yeah, I know. I think I gotta get going. Yeah. So
Not me.
we're gonna cut ourselves off.
Can we see like who?
Yeah. Well, we can do it.
AJ, where can everyone find you?
www.ajgovoni.com. Wild Vibes is www.wildvibes.org. And then just shoot me a message on Instagram, AJ Govoni,